Welcome to the pre-ready for Wednesday, October 23rd. We are going to wrap up our discussion of fruits and vegetables. I realize it was a short section as compared to the others we've done prior, but this will give us a good lead-in to the midterm exam on Friday. We're going to mainly look at fruits today. I'll talk a little bit about vegetables, but our priority is talking about fruits and how they can contribute to the jam or jelly making process. When we think about fruits, there are certain ripeness standards that we are looking for. Something that's not ripe enough typically is harder to chew, not as sweet, as compared to something that's very ripe. And then if we look at something that's overripe, it's probably soft and mushy, lost some of the flavor that we expect from that certain type of fruit. Ripeness is essentially the peak time to pick a fruit if you're going to eat it right away, because we want to expose all of those sugars that are available. As fruits start to mature and ripen, they're converting starch, their carbohydrate component, into sugar, and so that's where we get the sweetness of fruits. On the flip side, vegetables, as they mature, they are starting to convert sugar into starch. Classic example of this, if you were to go pick some sweet corn out of the field and eat it right away, it's very sweet, but if you let it sit a day, it will lose some of that sugar content, be not as sweet as what it would have been the day before. So as a commercial production or commercial producer of fruits, you might have to ask yourself, when's the best time to pick? Is it at peak ripeness or is it slightly before? The advantage of picking slightly before peak ripeness is to ensure that during transfer or packaging, the fruits are not going to be damaged, because as a fruit ripens, the texture or the cell integrity will start to soften. It's easier to bruise those fruits, and with bruising, we know from last time, we can start to expose those fruits to oxygen and cause some browning reactions or some flavor changing reactions. So if we're trying to sell a fruit in a grocery store and we know it's going to take a week or two to get those fruits to the grocery store, we would want to pick a week or two before peak ripeness. One thing to think about is as fruits start to ripen, they become softer, and they do that because of a substance called pectin. Pectin is a water-soluble carbohydrate that is found in fruits, and it will start to degrade after harvesting. In answering what is pectin a little bit further, we're going to go back to our basic carbohydrate map. Pectin, if you remember, was found in the soluble fiber category. So looking down here at our map, we see pectins here. So it's a soluble fiber source, meaning it can dissolve in water. Beyond food, looking just at plant structure, pectin is found in the cell walls of plant tissues. We see here an animation of a cell wall. Plant cell walls are different than our cell walls, and they have multiple layers. So in the primary cell wall layer, we see these cellulose microfibrils. And if we go back to our fiber map, we see cellulose is insoluble. So both cellulose and pectin contribute to plant cell structure. As we lose the integrity of pectin, as it starts to break down due to harvest or certain other factors, we see that cell walls start to soften. And so if we want a fruit to become softer, this would be the case in peaches. We want the peach to become softer and sweeter. We would want that pectin to break down. But we don't want it to break down too much that it becomes a very mushy fruit to consume. Fruits have different levels of pectin. All fruit has some pectin, but it varies in terms of high or low amounts. Fruits that are more rigid in structure, like apples or plums or grapes, they're going to have higher pectin content. So that makes sense because pectin is found in the plant cell wall and helps structurally support those cell walls as they function, as they grow in the ground, on the vine, or on the tree. Fruits that have low pectin are those like peaches, strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries. There's just not a strong, rigid structure holding those fruits together, so that's why we have to package them in, say, a plastic container rather than just setting them out on the shelf. So pectin can come from fruits, but it also can come through artificial means. So we can make commercial pectin We would get pectin from fruit, peels of citrus fruit, and apple pomace. Apple pomace is just the leftover solid portion after we squeeze that apple or press that apple for juice. We would get pectin out of those because they're very high in pectin content. And so then we could manufacture them to sell commercially to industries that are making jams or jellies, such as Smucker's. If we were thinking more lower scale, smaller scale, we can always go to the grocery store and buy pectin in the baking section or the canned goods section. They come in two different forms, liquid or powder. And our premise on Wednesday is to investigate whether substitution of liquid for powdered pectin or vice versa is possible, because really we have to understand the mechanism of pectin to substitute. We can't just do a direct substitution if we only have liquid powder or liquid pectin in the cupboard and the recipe calls for powdered pectin. With that, jam is going to be our primary focus on Wednesday. We will be making strawberry jam. There are 4 different basic ingredients to every jam recipe, and those are fruit, pectin, sugar, and acid. Your base component is going to be fruit. You can choose any type of fruit. Again, your jam will turn out certain ways based on the pectin and acid content of the fruit. But for the most part, any fruit will do, especially if you're adding additional artificial pectin. Then beyond fruit and pectin, we have to add sugar and acid. Sugar and acid are key players. Without them, our jam will not set and will not come gel-like. It'll be just a runny syrup. In thinking about sugar, we always add about equal amounts of sugar to equal amounts of fruit. And that's usually by weight, but oftentimes it's represented in cups. So if we add 1.5 cups of sugar, we should add about 1.5 cups of fruit. The function of sugar is multifaceted. First and foremost, and probably most obvious, is that it is a flavor contributor. Jams typically are very sweet, and that's because we add a lot of sugar. But we don't just add sugar for flavor, we add it for chemical reasons. When pectin starts to form a gel, it binds to other pectin molecules. But any water from the fruit or water that we add can inhibit pectin from binding and causing that gel to form. So sugar will tie up any water, take it away. That way pectin doesn't bind to it, and it can go find other pectin molecules to bind and set the gel. Also, we're going to add copious amounts of sugar, it seems. It's very, very sweet. But adding that much sugar also acts as a preservative. If sugar binds with water, just like we talked about when it's trying to get that pectin to form, that water is no longer available for microbes that might be present to use, and so therefore we inhibit microbial growth and prevent foodborne illness from occurring. The next major component of a jam recipe is an acid. Fruits do have some acid themselves. Those that have enough acid to probably assist in the jam making process are apples, grapefruits, blackberries, or cranberries. Blueberry jam is pretty popular. Cherry jam, those would be fruits that don't have enough acid, so we have to add an acid. And the easiest way to do that is just to add lemon or lime juice. The function of the acid is to neutralize pectin. So if you see here on the screen, I've boxed an OH group. That is saying that it's a slightly negative charge on this pectin molecule, and we have multiple OH groups around that pectin. So as a pectin molecule tries to come in contact with another, because there are negative charges on each of them, they'll try to repel each other. So through that repulsion, they just can't physically form together and then create that gel that's typical of a jam. So we prevent that repulsion by adding an acid, neutralizing it, and say, okay, we can actually be friends, and these two pectin molecules can come closer and closer and bond together to make the jam. The ideal pH range is pretty acidic, 2.8 to 3.3, but by a simple addition of lemon juice, we're going to get there very easily. All right, so now the actual jam making process. You're going to go through this on Wednesday, but I want to give you a heads up. So when we use dry powdered pectin that comes in a little box, there's a certain set of steps we have to follow that differ from if we use a pouch of liquid pectin. So in the dry powdered pectin, we would typically want to heat and mash the fruit that we're using. On Wednesday, we're going to make strawberry jam. So strawberries, we're going to use frozen ones. They're whole, so we're going to heat them up, cause some breakdown of that cellulose, and pectins for it to soften, and then mash that up. What mashing does is kind of expose more and more pectin to the outside environment, and that environment is any powdered pectin that we add, the lemon juice that we add. We're also going to add some vinegar to create even more acidic environment. And some people say that addition of pectin, whether powdered or liquid, causes some changes in a true jam recipe. The flavor will be a little bit different, but the cook time will be shorter. So it's kind of a give and take on what you want to use. Do you want to add artificial pectin, or do you want to just employ the pectin that's already in the fruit? But for us, strawberries are pretty low in pectin, so we're going to add that powdered pectin on top of the strawberries. And then any available water that was exposed after mashing the fruit will bind with that pectin. But we don't want water and pectin to bind, because that means pectin is not available to bind to itself. So we're going to boil the jam fruit mix. That's going to evaporate off any water and add sugar. So the sugar again is going to interact with water and allow the pectin to bind. But we have to remember pectin will come closer together, but they're still going to repel if we haven't neutralized or added an acid to negate the neutralization or neutralize that pectic substance. So we're going to add lemon juice, and so we can get those pectin molecules to bind upon cooling. The big thing to remember when you're using dry powdered pectin is to add it very early in the process. So you're going to add it directly to the fruit in the first step or two. The reason we do that is because then we have time through the boiling process and the mixing process for that pectin to be distributed through the entire fruit mixture. If you were to wait and add, say, the strawberries, the sugar, the lemon juice, the vinegar, boil it, and then add the powdered pectin, we're going to get some gelling, but we haven't been able to distribute that pectin evenly, so we're going to get what we call a bad set, or sets in the gel that are really great in some spots of the jam, but then get a little bit runny in other spots of the jam. On the flip side, though, we can use liquid pectin at the end of a recipe. So we would add in just that fruit, sugar, vinegar, acid, mix and boil, allow it to kind of all congeal together, and then at the very end, add liquid pectin and just boil for a short while. That's because liquid pectin is much easier to distribute through the entire mixture, and so we're not going to get any bad sets. With that, I will see you on Wednesday to make some strawberry jam. We are going to have 4 different variations of a jam recipe, adding pectin, different types of pectin at different times, and see which one gels better than others. We'll see you in class.